You're listening to the RAMA Blueprints podcast, Extra Commentary with Dr. Sai Lea Tutufu Birch. Welcome to the RAMA Blueprints podcast. I am your host, Socorro Gamboa. We are honored to share this space through the sacred lands we stand on, from the Chumash, Tongva Gabrielino peoples in Southern California to the Ohlone in Northern California. We are joined by a woman who doesn't just study liberation, she breathes it. Dr. Sai is the founder of the Economic Emancipation and SLB Strategies Organization, a social impact-focused consulting firm. She is guided by a core belief: liberate with love, transform with power. A proud daughter of San Francisco, rooted in the soil of Bayview Hunters Point and North Beach, she carries the dual ancestral fire of her Black and Samoan heritage. As a scholar, a mother, and liberationist at her core, she has dedicated her life to ensuring our freedom dreams have a concrete blueprint to live in. She brings a deeply held belief that Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty are achievable in her lifetime, guiding her relentless commitment to transformative community-centered stay. We are humbled and honored to have with us Dr. Sadai Sai Lea Tutufu Birch, a true architect of community, power, and systemic change. Thank you for your commentary on the recent Tres Generaciones, Three Voices discussion, from invisibility to visibility, the rise of the Raza, the Pacific Islander people of San Francisco. Welcome, Dr. Sai. We are so excited to be in community with you as you represent the people of the Raza. Dr. Sai, as a daughter of this city carrying both Black and Samoan ancestry, you live at the intersection of two cultures that have always survived by making the invisible visible. After listening to the live episode, From Invisibility to Visibility, the Rise of the Raza, how do you feel this intergenerational discussion provides a new or improved blueprint for Black and Pacific Islander solidarity and leadership in the soul of San Francisco right now? When did you first realize that refusing to be invisible was the ultimate blueprint for our collective healing?
Well, in order to understand where the blueprint is taking us, I think it's important to understand where I've been and what my journey has been learning how to hold being Black and being Samoan. My first experience, and it came up in the episode that I listened to when Gaynor mentioned being Afakasi. So Afakasi in the Samoan culture is a hybrid term that means half one or half breed. So my first experience with anti-Blackness and learning what it meant to be Black in Samoan was actually in my Samoan household, when my grandfather slammed the door on my Black mother's face and called her stupid. And I knew that he still loved me, but it also began to embed in my mind, well, what does that mean for my position as a young child? Couldn't have been more than 5 years old, in a house where I'm watching this patriarch of my family essentially disrespect my mother to tears, and how that started to show up as a budding adolescent was me and my sister and my cousins, who were also Afkasi, not being able to participate in our cultural ceremonies, not being asked to do some of the activities that full-blooded Samoans got to do, that my full-blooded Samoan cousins, as if we weren't trusted to enact and implement our culture. And so that was my experience as a child. But over time, my father had been very intentional about undoing the harm that was done to us. He recognized that his daughters and his nieces and nephews, who were Afakasi, had a place in our culture, in our Samoan culture, and so did his best to teach us what it meant to be Samoan, what it meant to be Pacific Islander, and what it meant to be a part of the Raza. And so into my adulthood, I've taken a bunch of intention to sit at the feet of my elders. My dad took me to Samoa we went to Samoa as children, but didn't know much about what the cultural experience was, or it was hard to contextualize for myself. But in 2015, I went on a tour of Samoa, to the land of my forefathers with my dad, who showed me our land, who showed me his birthplace or where he was raised, who showed me the birthplace of my grandfather, and who showed me what it meant to be Samoan and what it meant to be Pacific Islander, and how we hold on to this depth, that not only resonates with the people but resonates with the ocean. I can remember sitting on the top of a mountaintop in Samoa and him explaining Moana Blue, which means that the ocean is blue and is so vast that we are people of the ocean, and we belong in this world, in this space. And so that leading me back to your question about what it means for the intergenerational blueprint, it means that I'm constantly learning. And so my grandfather, who is now an ancestor, uh, later in his life, he became more loving, and he became more teaching in showing us what it meant to be Samoan. And then, as grandparents grow older, they love all their grandchildren just the same. So I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
the harm that he caused and was not intentional, but he was a very stern man who cared about his people and cared about raising us right. So I understand from that perspective. But I do think that the intergenerational blueprint is necessary in terms of, for somebody like me who did not grow up primarily as a Samoan. I grew up in a Black community, because I lived with my mom, but I did have shared experiences and times where I did live with my dad and learn what it meant to be Samoan. That it's important our elders can show us the cultural way, but also that we can teach our elders. So I've had conversations with my dad about what it not saying meauli. Meauli is another hybrid term in Samoan that means black thing. But it is the word that is used to describe black people in the Samoan language. And so my dad does not use that term anymore. And what I knew as a kid is anytime I heard somebody say uli or mea uli, that they were talking about me and my sister. They had to be, because that was the name for black people. And ironically, or interestingly enough, when my grandparents came from Hawaii in Samoa, the first community to accept them was the Black community. And that is the experience for many Pacific Islanders. When we come over from the homeland and we landed in San Francisco or whichever communities we landed in, it was the Black community who accepted us first, who took us in, who taught us what it meant to be Americanized, or showed us, adjusted us to the American culture. So when my dad and my grandparents came to San Francisco, they lived in West Point. They lived in Hunters Point. They lived in North Beach Projects. And it was Black people who kind of showed us, okay, welcome to San Francisco. Here's how we operate. And here's how they helped us adjust to this new culture. And so I would say that intergenerational blueprint, it not only teaches those like myself, who I'm a millennial, it teaches me about the culture and what it means to be Samoan the traditional way, but there's a shared learning where I can also share, okay, because I am Americanized in many ways, or because I've assimilated to American culture, that I am also able to teach my parent, my dad specifically, and my aunts and uncles, what it means for us growing up here, because the culture here on the mainland, which is what we identified as, is not the same as what it is at home and how they grew up. And so we get to teach each other.
Well, thank you for that. I want to explore just a little bit more about what you mentioned in the episode when Gaynor mentions, the duality of her lineage. She talks about just her personal struggle, but also a little bit about how you've been able to navigate that as a Afrokasi woman, and have had to balance that out, and including with maybe other BIPOC women. Could you kind of share that a little bit for people to hear?
Absolutely. There was a transition point, I would say, in high school where Up until high school, I identified as Black, and because I went to a predominantly Black elementary school, grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and then in high school, I began to shape my thinking about what it meant to be Black and Samoan. I knew I was Black and Samoan because my dad taught me that, but there was this turning point where I would engage with my Pacific Islander peers and classmates and Samoan peers and classmates, and they would speak the language. And I didn't speak the language, but I could
Yeah.
understand some of what was being said. And so when they're speaking the language, there was this um, kind of like a diminishing of my experience being Samoan because I did not speak the language. And so, people would laugh or make jokes that I couldn't speak Samoan, but what that did for me was open me up to wanting to learn more. And so I took the time to sit with my grandpa, to talk to my dad. Okay, well, who is this family member? What does it we came from this village and what does that mean? Can you explain our family history and how we're connected to to each other? Samoa is an island of 300,000 people. And so we are all connected. We are some way, some shape, some form connected to family. And there was also a turning point in my family where my dad got married, and he married my stepmom or my mom, and who was a Samoan woman. And so that created something else in us because there was a lot of confusion. We were raised that all Samoans were connected, but ultimately we did the research and they are not related. But that again forced me to want to learn more. And so that duality or how I adjusted to holding being Black and Samoan, I one started to operate like, okay, I belong here. I may not speak the language, but the culture is embedded in me. I've already been to Samoa as a child, and I've participated in the cultural events, and so there was no shame. I started to be proud that I was Samoan. It also helped me that we would see Pacific Islanders on the TV screen. So the WWE on the football field, like these, when we talk about Rashiki and Dwayne Johnson or The Rock, Andre the Giant, all
Right.
these big name people. It's like, okay, well, Samoans are we're or Pacific Islanders, we are a thing. Like we contribute to this
Oh,
country, we
yeah.
contribute to this world. Like, okay, so I have nothing to be ashamed of just because I was raised in a English speaking household or in a Black community. Like there is something that I should be proud of. I know this man, The Rock's grandpa lived with us in San Francisco.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm like, okay, I'm connected with Peter Maivia, and The Rock's mom lived with us for a little stint, and so I'm like, okay, this is good. Like I can share. This is my entry point. Like I may not speak it, but I let me give y'all fun facts about how I'm related to X, Y, and Z. Um, so that started to in high school. It started to raise a sense of pride in me, and then people became inquisitive when I would start to share I'm Black and Samoan. Those who were not familiar with the Pacific Islanders, they would ask, "Oh, well, where is Samoa or where is Samoa? Where is? Can you say more about Pacific Islands?" And I would share, well, it's more than just your vacation destination. We contribute to the world when you think about um, agriculture, and when you think about also the military, which there is when we talk about indigenous sovereignty, there is a fight to liberate the islands because we're currently um, colonized by the U.S. as military bases, but it is something that contributes to this country. And so I would share my experience about what it meant to be Pacific Islander, specifically Samoan, and that began to rise in me pride. I started to take pride that I was the only one in the spaces that I was in. Like I got to represent being the Pacific Islander in the room, the Samoan in the room, especially when we, as a people, when we think about the disparities, which also came up in the episode, the educational disparities that we experience. I was someone who was in AP classes, in honors classes, all throughout my educational career. And so the fact that I was this Black and Samoan woman who was excelling educationally, I began to take pride in disproving the expectations that we were not worthy educationally. And my story and experience shows something different.
Yeah, I first of all, thank you for your answer and for your insight, for your wisdom. I mean, when we were in the conversation with Gaynor and Anna and Tino, uh, a lot of that passion and what you're saying is their own journey and led them to become who they are and to get involved in community. And in the episode they keep referring back to the elders and listening to the stories. Tino talks a lot about carrying the traditions uh, and practicing those traditions, but not practicing, but it is a way of life. And in speaking to our own elder in the Latino community, Concha Saucedo, Dr. Saucedo, she says this community work is not, it's not work, it's a vocation. It's what we do because we stand and we represent for our people. Um, and thank you for that. In the episode, is there something that spoke to you that it's important to mention from your perspective?
I would speak to the data point that was shared.
Mm.
Gaynor specifically mentioned 3,359 Pacific Islanders in terms of
Right.
people, and us being numerically small or undercounted in San Francisco, and that reflecting the resources that are invested, almost to say that because Pacific Islanders are so numerically small in San Francisco, we are not worth the investment and the organizing that was necessary in order to make the investment to push the city to really see us. And
Right.
so when we talk about invisibility to visibility, we as a people, we are numerically small but mighty and powerful.
Mm.
And I know we can't trust the census, but I believe in according to the 2020 census, we were hovering somewhere around 9,000
Right. Right.
who
Right.
responded. And yet still, I will double down on what was said. When we look at preterm birth rates, when we look at graduation rates from high school and reading levels in education preparedness, when we look at our health disparities, Pacific Islanders are second to experience the disparities across every category next to Black folks. And so we
Mhm.
started the conversation with the interconnectedness of being Black and being Pacific Islander. And we are one when it comes to the disparities. And so when we
Mhm.
see that the city of San Francisco has not invested in the Black community, and that in turn affects and impacts the investment or lack thereof for Pacific Islanders. And so that really stood out to me in the movement, the solidarity movement being one that is necessary for the
Yes.
collective investment and for our collective liberation. One thing that I wholeheartedly believe, I like to say I had the best of both worlds because I'm Black and Samoan. But what I know for sure is that until my Black is free, my Samoan will never be free. And
Wow.
so until Black people are free, Samoans will never be liberated. And we must, when the city, we've seen the data, when we invest intentionally in the Black community, Pacific Islanders benefit. When we invest intentionally in Pacific Islanders, other communities of culture, to use the words that Gaynor used, benefit. And so
Mhm.
that is something, that is a fight that is going to continue because we see these resources now are under threat. There are imminent cuts happening now to the
Right.
Pacific Islander community, to the Black community, that if we do not address it, we will get back to the numbers in the 70s and get back to the lack of investment that led to the team or my family members. I will identify them as my family members who talked to you, that led to them needing to organize in the first place. So that solidarity movement, the organizing to have a scene, to have the city value our experiences, and then to invest in our well-being is what I am concerned about and what we are fighting for.
Absolutely. I recall my experience in the late 80s, and early 90s, up to the 2000s in San Francisco. And there wasn't a place that we didn't walk with the Samoan and the Black community hand in hand. Obviously, working at the Real Alternatives program provided me that opportunity, that insight to see that not just by ourselves, but we had to be in groups. And thinking of the elders that I met back in those days and the influence and how we led through that advocacy. And you can see the shift. You can see with this new mayor and this new government there in San Francisco, trying to eradicate nonprofits and work and folks that are doing excellent work to, squash us down again and put us down and forget about us. And you can see it obviously. I want to push just a little bit, talk a little bit more about, we in producing this podcast, we operate under the framework of RAP, of principles of self-determination. And when we think about self-determination and the community, and specifically the BIPOC community, the community of the Black and Samoan, what are your thoughts on that, and how would you see this in the step to self-determination?
So the one thing that rap leads with, in that I hold true in terms of my virtue and principle, is love. The practicing of radical love.
Yeah.
We do this work. Samoans, Pacific Islanders, and Samoans, as a Samoan woman, are a loving people. What you know will happen when you come to our home is you will be fed. You will be fed physically, mentally, spiritually. And that is the same experience in the Black household. It has also been my experience when I go to visit my Latino brothers and sisters.
Right.
We are getting fed. So we will get a meal, and then we will get knowledge because we're engaging in conversation. We will get a hug. All of that is done through the lens of radical love. And it is something that is absent from this environment that we exist in today. There is not enough of leading with love. There is not enough of love shared and exchanged. And so I am really doubling down on that in terms of the principles and the philosophy that you all share. I
Thank
also I would also point to dignity and respect. We do this through respect and dignity, in knowing and understanding that everyone has worth, everyone belongs. And I like to say that prosperity is our birthright. I learned this from my sister, who's also my cousin. She talks. There is something in Samoan culture, in Pacific Islander culture, called a pe'a. A pe'a is a tattoo, the traditional markings for families who are pursuing chiefhood in our culture, or are descendants of the chief. And the pe'a is a ceremonial action. So to some who are outside of the culture, it may just seem as a tattoo, but there are meanings to the markings. And so my sister, she was in Aotearoa in New Zealand, and she was getting a tattoo and considering getting a pe'a, and she didn't think that she was worthy of it. And the artist who was doing it for her said, "Well, Risa, you're Pacific Islander, you're Samoan, so the pe'a is your birthright." And so this notion that being here is our birthright because we contribute to community. The love that we experience is our birthright. The investment that we're fighting for is our birthright. The community that we're building is our birthright. So understanding that we've inherited the richness of this land, and we deserve to experience it because we've given so much to it. And so that dignity and respect that rap talks about, the love for the people that rap talks about, and then of course the activism, this fight in solidarity, and how we need to continue to fight for our just due, are just a few of the principles and philosophy that I appreciate and I think contribute to the work that I'm doing and help trying to lead myself.
Well, I thank you for that. Finally, Dr. Simon, I mean, we could probably go on and talk. I know that the Fa'asamoa initiative is something that is really important. That is, and when you were speaking about the language and speaking about what was important, I think when you think about the work of Ursula Siataga and Coach Wiley within side of the school district. Could you just briefly talk about what that program with the dual language, how critical that is, and why is it important?
Absolutely. And I love Ursula and Coach Wiley and the entire team that launched Fosse in the time where this country is wanting to erase critical race theory, is wanting to erase how our history is taught in schools, is wanting to erase cultural education. Fosse, the Fa'asamoa initiative couldn't be more important. When I learned that it was being piloted at what was my preschool, current, currently called Leola Havard, I thought, oh, well, why wasn't this available when I went there? But it is so necessary because the dual language component, the opportunity for not only Pacific Islander students, but students across cultures to learn about Samoan culture, to learn about what it means to be Pacific Islander, can start to instill that pride earlier. And what I started with the story, I didn't have that as a child. I felt very isolated. And so now the Fosse initiative or the Fosse program is doing what I wish existed, is providing the cultural education, is teaching about the language, and is instilling pride in these students. I had the opportunity to facilitate a workshop with some of the high school students who participate as a part of the initiative, and the hope that was present in the room. Once you break through kind of the nerves of being in high school and teenagers being teenagers, the brilliance that shines through, the words that they have to say about being proud and being Pacific Islander, the love that was shared in the room. It's initiatives such as Fosse that are necessary for our children to know that they belong, to know that there is a future for them, to know that there is a place for them, not only in this city, but in this world. And so I would say, in terms of the investment of Fosse, the intentionality behind it, it is an initiative that should move forward, that is contributing to hundreds of students learning and growing, and I'm in full support of it.
All right, thank you. So finally, we always ask our guests and, ask, especially you, Dr. Syed, to leave finally, for the younger generation, there's folks that are listening, that will be listening to the episode. Those third generation voices who are inheriting this legacy, they're out there. What is your liberationist advice for them as they carry this flame of visibility forward?
My liberationist advice. Well, first, I would be remiss if I did not mention in bringing to the space, although I talked about them, I want to honor my ancestors in this space. High Chief Lea Tutufu Fualau Toalasi Lea Luso'o Powau Willie was my grandfather. Tafonga Tavae Wepa Amiaku Lea Tutufu, my grandmother. And Marilyn Rose Robinson, my another grandmother. That contributes to the liberationist road ahead and to getting free ahead, honoring our ancestors, honoring where we've come from to know where we're going. I would tell anyone who is in the pursuit of collective liberation that we belong, that freedom is our birthright, that prosperity is our birthright, and that we are the blueprint. We are the cultural blueprint for this country collectively. That when we move together in solidarity across oceans, between Black folks, Pacific Islanders, Latino communities, our American Indian relatives, that we are stronger together and that our solidarity is a force that we know when we work together cannot be touched, I will say. I'm grateful to just be doing this work. And for those who are listening to know that every day that you have breath, you have purpose. Every day that we wake up is a new opportunity to work towards the life that we expect, that we deserve, and that we want for the generations that are coming after us.
Whoa, thank you so much. Thank you for your sharing your heart, your corazon, your wisdom, your insight, and many blessings to you to continue the work, your advocacy work that you continue to do for, the Black and Pacific Islander communities, as well as other communities, as you mentioned. Thank you for your for continuing the movement of radical love and continuing the movement of freedom and liberation. You're listening to the RAMA Blueprints Podcast Extra Commentary, Dr. Sai. This episode was produced and edited by Darren J. De Leon and Socorro Gamboa. The Five Sisters Audio Garden would like to acknowledge the following: CARECEN SF and its marketing team, Instituto Familiar de la Raza, United Players, Horizons Unlimited, Pacific Resource Hut, SALT, the Fa'a Samoa Initiative, and the California Arts Council Impact Projects Grant, and many individual supporters who have graciously donated to our production. Please subscribe and share with folks. And remember, to listen is to heal. All power to the people.